Hello everyone. Today I want to share with you an inspiring story about dreams, loss, and the power to rise again. This is the story of a boy who loved the stars, whose ambition knew no bounds, yet faced the hardest moments of his life. A story that teaches us that even when everything is taken from us, we can find a new path and shine, not just for ourselves but for the world. Get ready to dive into the journey of the light of hope. From the very beginning, Stephen wasn't like most children. While others spent their days playing games or chasing each other in playgrounds, Stephen had his head buried in books about the stars, galaxies, and the mysterious infinity of space. He was a quiet child, thoughtful and kind, with eyes that seemed to hold constellations. At school, Stephen was the top of his class. His teachers admired his brilliance, and his classmates respected him, not just for his intelligence, but for the way he always helped anyone who was struggling. Whether it was explaining a tough math equation or sharing his lunch with a friend who forgot theirs, Stephen's heart was as vast as the sky he dreamed of reaching. His bedroom walls were covered with drawings of rocket ships, alien worlds, and handwritten equations scribbled on pieces of paper. He didn't just dream of becoming an astronaut, he prepared for it. Night after night, he stared at the stars from his small telescope, whispering promises to them that one day he'd join them.
"You can do it," his mother used to say as she tucked him into bed. "You were born to reach the stars."
His father, a mechanic, would bring home old machine parts just so Stephen could build models and pretend they were part of a real spacecraft. In high school, Stephen joined science clubs, space camps, and charity groups. He didn't just grow smarter, he grew more compassionate. He helped fundraise for underprivileged children, volunteered at animal shelters, and even taught younger students science for free. By the time he graduated, Stephen was already well known in his city. Not because he sought fame, but because people couldn't help but notice a young man so brilliant, humble, and kind. He became a role model for many, proof that intelligence meant nothing without heart. His dream came closer when he applied to a prestigious space sciences university. It was one of the hardest programs in the world to get into, but Stephen was accepted with honors. He studied tirelessly, often being the first to arrive in the lab and the last to leave. Professors marveled at his grasp of astrophysics and engineering. After years of dedication, he graduated at the top of his class and joined an international space agency. His childhood dream was no longer a fantasy. It was now his job. Stephen trained with astronauts, engineers, and scientists from around the globe. Every time he received news that he'd be part of a mission, he would beam with joy. He loved his work more than anything. Until one day, something happened that would change everything. It was a bright morning when Stephen boarded the shuttle for what was supposed to be a simple orbital mission. Everything went according to plan, until launch. Just seconds after takeoff, a malfunction occurred. A small error in the fuel system led to a massive explosion, shaking the entire launch facility. The rocket fell back, engulfed in fire and metal. Emergency crews rushed to the site. Most of the team survived with minor injuries, but Stephen was found unconscious, his body crushed by parts of the spacecraft. He was rushed to the hospital and placed in a coma. The doctors weren't sure if he would make it, and if he did, they said, he would never walk again. Stephen remained in a coma for an entire year. His parents visited every day, holding his hands, reading to him, whispering stories of stars and hope. Then, one quiet morning, his eyes opened. But waking up wasn't a blessing. It was the beginning of a nightmare. Stephen couldn't move his legs. Machines beeped around him. Nurses smiled gently, but their eyes carried pity.
Why? Why did I survive? Just to sit here? Just to remember everything I lost?
The Stephen who once inspired the world began to fade. Weeks turned into months. Physical therapy hurt. His body ached. But worse than the pain was the emptiness. He stopped speaking much. He refused visitors. His drawings were gone. The stars, once so full of magic, now seemed like distant strangers. And then one evening, while flipping through the radio stations out of boredom, he heard something.
The city's Open Chess Championship is accepting participants. All skill levels welcome. Sign up before next Friday. Everyone deserves a second chance.
But something in the voice of the announcer stirred him. A second chance. He thought about it for days. Then finally, he signed up. The first match was in a small community center. Stephen rolled in, uncertain, nervous. People stared, some curious, others whispering. But as soon as the first game began, everything around him disappeared. The board, the pieces, the strategy, it was like space again. Infinite, logical, beautiful. He won. Not easily, but clearly. He kept winning, round after round. And then, the unexpected happened. He qualified for the national level. Reporters came, people started talking again. Steven, the space hero who now conquers the chessboard. Interviews flooded in, but what Steven loved most wasn't the fame. It was the feeling of focus, of purpose. Chess became his new universe, the board, a galaxy, each game, a mission, and the public fell in love with him again. Not because he was undefeated, but because he showed them that it was possible to rise from nothing, that even when life burned your wings, you could still fly, differently. Months later, Steven stood on stage at the World Chess Championship. The lights, the crowd, the silence, it all felt surreal. His opponent was a grandmaster, but Steven played with heart, each move telling a story of resilience, and he won. Tears streamed down his face as the crowd rose in a standing ovation, not for a chess player, but for a fighter. Years passed. Steven became a mentor. He opened a school for disabled children, teaching them not just chess, but how to dream again. He visited hospitals, shared his story, and reminded people, life can change in a second, but that doesn't mean you're finished. Maybe it just means you're being rerouted to a different kind of greatness. People continued calling him a hero, but Steven always smiled and said, I'm not a hero, I'm just someone who decided to move my piece, even when the board looked impossible. And on the wall of his classroom behind him hung an old drawing, a rocket ship surrounded by stars. Because even if he never reached space, he had touched the hearts of a world that desperately needed light. And in the darkest nights, Steven became a star. Moral of the story: no matter how hard life gets, no matter how much is taken from you, there is always something left to give. Even a shattered dream can become a new path. The sky is never out of reach if you learn to fly in a new way. Title: The Light of Hope. Written in love for dreamers, warriors, and anyone who's ever had to start again. And so, Steven showed us that life may take a lot from us, but there is always a second chance. Whether our dreams come true the way we imagined or not, what matters most is that we keep moving forward, in our own way. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like and share, and always remember, even in the darkest moments, we can still be stars.